And as expected, reactions have begun to trail the presentation of the 2018 budget proposal by President Muhammadu Buhari to a joint session of the National Assembly. We spoke with some senators after that sitting, and quite a number of them seem to have some good words and perhaps a very optimistic perception of this budget. Let's check it out.
Circumstances we're in, given the circumstances we're in, given
We apologize for that mix-up. As soon as we fix that, we'll get the details to you. Let me introduce my guest to you on the show today. I have columnist with Punch newspaper, Lekan Shote, joining us again. Thank you very much for finding time to come.
Thank you, Nifemi.
And public affairs analyst Biodun Showumi is here in the house with us. Thank you so much for coming.
I'm pleased to be here.
All right, so where do we start from? There seemed to be a lot of talk about the early presentation of the budget proposal. Some say it's unprecedented. Others are of the opinion that it's coming at a time when the 2017 budget has not even been implemented halfway. How do you react to that, Lekan?
Well, last year was December, towards the end of December, was presented and we didn't get it until, I think, until June or so.
Or May
or thereabout. And so we are like about a month and a few weeks ahead of last year. So I'm hoping that will be an advantage. I think that's good. If we ultimately, eventually, I'm hoping that we'll be able to present these things earlier than. Don't forget, we also have the what looks like a, shall we say, development program for about 3 years, which will start from 2018 to 2020. So I'm hoping that they can plug in 2019 to 2020 into that. So I think it's a good development.
Okay, you'll recall that in 2017, Ekwuremadu had urged the executive to present the 2018 budget early enough to enable the National Assembly return to the budget cycle of January to December. Right. But the 2017 budget took about 4 months for the National Assembly to look into. Is it hopeful? Are you optimistic that we're going to return to that 12-month cycle?
I wish. I don't know about hope. I wish we return to that. And the president says that he's hoping that by January 1st, the budget. I don't think so. But I'm hopeful. I wish that we have that. I think it's best for us so that we know when we have a deadline, we hit the deadline and work with it. I mean, even he's telling us that 2017 budget, it is like by the end of the year, that is when he may be able to hit 50% of the capital aspect of the budget, which tells me that he himself, I guess, knows that this is not the best.
But what's the implication of that? That means we have not hit the 50% mark of implementing the 2017 budget. What's the implication of not having a full implementation, or let me say a half implementation on the new year?
Well, what you see is that we are not making any progress in relation to that, because to design a project to the point of putting it through due process and all that takes about 6 months. So if the budget for this year was approved in May, and by November, that is when you've just completed the design, then you put it to adverts in December. Before you award the contract, you have to return the whole money back to the Treasury, because you are no longer lawfully allowed to spend that money to roll it over. So what basically it means is that many new projects will not start as envisaged, in the 2017 budget. The second problem is really not has to do with the federal government itself. We can blame the lawmakers for delaying or for taking so much time out of work or not paying enough attention to it. Yes, you'll be right to say that they even play political games, political football with the budget. That is correct. But also, there's also the problem with presenting a budget of over 1,500 pages. Look, Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore, you know, developed Singapore with only 16 pages. The budget was never more than 16 pages of document, which he used in developing Singapore, you know, moving it from third class, you know, country to a first world. So by the time many of the members of the House of Reps or senators manage to digest that budget, it would already be almost 2 months already. So we should forget about whether that budget itself will be passed 1st of January. By the time they now agree and then come to harmonization, you are looking at another 2 months. So the earliest time we can have this budget passed is March, because it's voluminous, you know, and those who are preparing that budget are doing that on purpose, in line with the civil service practices, you know, culture of if you make it too detailed, it will be difficult for people to pick out where the budget is loaded, you know, and that is what is going on currently.
Let's look at the executive-legislature relationship. I'm going to read an excerpt from Mr. President's speech. We took him about over an hour. It's amazing to know that he's strong and he's looking healthy. We all need to play our role to ensure the right thing is done. I would also like to remind Nigerians that the whistleblower lines are still open. During the 2017 budget proposal, and while the Senate, the National Assembly was sitting, we saw what played out at the House of Representatives, where Abdulmumin Jibrin blew a whistle about budget padding. Do you expect an episode with this document?
Well, Femi, you want to play the role of a prophet. You see, Nigerians are unpredictable, or rather they are predictable to do terrible things. You know, so you can't put it past them that in spite of what happened to Abdulmumin, he was suspended for 180 days. In addition to that, they say he must never hold any responsible office in government until the end of 2019. His peers have punished him for blowing the whistle on them. You get what I'm saying? So what makes me, for example, think that it will not happen again? I expect it to happen.
Perhaps lawmakers would have learnt their
because
lessons.
It's the same
now,
people, they have not been changed, there are no new people.
That,
so
if you mention pardon again, you're likely going to be suspended for 6 months.
Look, they will look for another way of doing this thing. I don't trust these guys. They are not there because they love you and I. They are there, it's a job for them. They've gone to seek employment where they will have great returns. And that's what is playing out.
Let's look at the parameters for this budget. Just like the 2017 budget, we see here that it appears that there are some similarities in the parameters. It's still 305 Naira projected per dollar. Of course, we have 2.3 million barrels per day as against 2.2 million that we had in 2017. Would you say, Mr. President in his speech seemed to have given himself some kudos about the work done in the Niger Delta. But we have news now that the militants are threatening to go back to the creek. What's the implication of that on the oil projection?
Yeah, I think the budget is a bit too optimistic. When you first take it in real terms, what does it mean? For me, it does not represent any significant change in our situation. Go back to the early 80s when Shehu Shagari was in power. You know, we were already budgeting $28 billion for budget, you know, based on oil proceeds. And today, this budget in real terms represents $28.6 billion. So what has changed? Does it mean our economy has not grown? Does it mean productive activities have not been taking place? What you've seen is a jump in the value of the budget in Naira terms, you know, from what it used to be 4-point-something trillion to 8 trillion. And that what explains that is the fact that we devalued the Naira. And the moment you devalue the Naira, we need those Naira to import goods. You know, you have to buy the foreign currency to import goods. So basically, we have not gained anything other than improve the ability of those states, you know, to pay salary. You know, getting the Naira when in reality it means, devaluation of the living standards of the people. And in terms of funding our budget appropriately, that has not happened. That is on one part to it. On the other side of it is also, in real terms, what does it mean for health? For instance, we budgeted 7% for health, against the 15% which we are committed to through an EU agreement, hosted by Nigeria. We budgeted, we budget 3.9% for health. We budgeted 7% for education as against 25% UNESCO standard. So what does that mean? In terms of revenue, how much are we really expecting? The federal government expects to go and borrow 1.699. They have a deficit of 2.005, and then they hope to borrow 1.699 out of it. It means a balance of about 700, would have to be sourced from somewhere, within the economy. So I think that is a huge tall order to expect revenue to jump up, significantly like that. The other side of it is we are spending about 2 trillion currently, to service the debt. So if we are now borrowing more, because 50% of that 1.699 will be sourced, externally, according to President Buhari, what it means is our debt situation will continue to, to deteriorate, and we will continue next year. We will need more money to service the same debt. We are not repaying those debt. We are servicing them. So basically, we are entering into the debt culture again. The budget is not being based on realistic income. It's being based on projected income, which may or may not, come in at the end of the day. The devil is also with the National Assembly when it comes to implementation. On implementation, what do we do with the budget? Is one thing to budget. That is why I'm not too bothered about the padding issue, which Lekon was commenting on, because even where the budget is not padded, do they release the funds for it? That is the problem. We don't have the cash to fund the budget. So that is always where we run into a problem.
Talking about not having cash to fund, Mr. President also touched about that when he made mention of under remittance of the operating surpluses by state-owned entities. An example is JAM, that recently remitted 7.8 billion naira back to the government. In past times, the aggregate was about 51 million naira. But then, if the president is still talking about this under an administration that stands for anti-corruption and the rest, I mean, are we in an unsolvable situation in this part of the world?
Femi, I listened to Professor Isesage, and I was disappointed. Some of us query that we've heard so much, or we've read so much in the newspapers, trial by media, and we can't quite have reports that people were sent to jail or sanctioned properly for these things. And then Isesage say, oh, well, let's just shame them, that's all. And that sounded strange to me. If somebody with Isesage's background, who has also been put into the presidency to do certain things about corruption, speaks like that, we're in serious trouble.
Does it in any way point to the fact that
tells you
it is an impossible
situation? It tells you the values of people who even counsel the government about anti-corruption to start with. So that if Magu will simply just take you around, some kind of rigmarole and then let you off at the end of the day. Or maybe they say, okay, can you do a plea bargaining? People need to be sanctioned. People must go to jail for stealing public funds.
It appears that we have to come to the reality, Biodun, that the president has to be politically correct. And it appears that jailing every person alleged to be corrupt is not going to happen under this administration.
Yeah, I will be shocked. I have not seen any major change in the rate of conviction when Ribadu was there under Obasanjo and when Jonathan was there, or when Buhari is now in power. Because what you see is, look, when people talk about processing people through criminal justice system, to account for their deeds or misdeeds, we keep forgetting that the criminal justice system is not just the court. It involves the prison. A judge is concerned about sending people to prison when already the prison population, the prison is already overpopulated. We are not building new prisons. We are not recruiting more police officers. We have not created special courts to facilitate, to accelerate trial of suspects. And then you want judges to send them in there. We have highly under-resourced anti-corruption agencies in EFCC and ICPC. At least EFCC, over the years, have been complaining about not having enough resources. Now, what we know is that in a diligent investigation, proper investigation will lead to diligent prosecution. And it is only diligent prosecution that can secure conviction or acquittal. But what you see is that we have cases being taken to court, badly prepared, and at the end of the day, those cases end up failing. Yes, EFCC have made some progress in terms of convictions, but they are never the big ones. They are always the small-time players, not those who actually, the governors, who were actually found to have looted the wealth, or former presidents in this country being processed through the criminal justice system. We seem to have accepted the fact that we can't do some things. Let me give you a good example. We have had cases of people saying in court that, look, so person authorized, Mr. President authorized this, authorized that, and nobody has bothered to talk to them or investigate or question them about their role in the disbursement of public funds in the past. So this is the major problem which we have. No matter what Buhari says, the minor gate, for me is damning. For the first time, if you are to believe the revelations, that came out in the press, it became obvious that Mr. President probably knew about minors' reinstatement.
We'll get back to that very shortly, but it appears that beyond looking out for corrupt politicians, JAMB has proven now that we need to also pay more attention to departments, agencies and ministries of government to be able to remit the proper amount that they are making. 7.8 billion naira relative to 51 million naira is a lot of money. But then Mr. President says despite the downturn in oil prices, the economic challenges, that his administration in 2017 was able to invest an unprecedented sum of over 1.2 trillion naira in capital projects through the 2016 budget. And this, according to him, is the highest ever in the history of this country. How much of impact do you think we have seen that made in our economy?
Well, we can't pretend that we can't see some things. I mean, I can see work on the Lagos-Ibadan Express Road. I can see in my neighborhood improvement in electricity. I can see that. But and I've heard about Abuja Rail Metro line is now 98% completed. The railway line from Abuja to Kaduna has been, shall we say, commissioned. And quite a few other projects. And of course he has told us that transmission capacity has improved from about 5,000 mega to a little over 7,000 megawatts, which means there's a higher carriage for electricity. However, distribution remains at 5%. And I don't understand that while you can't, it's supposed to be a value chain. You stop at a point, and I'm not sure we are getting the thing right, and then you are making promises in a situation where, I hope you know that the revenue projected for this year, the government did not meet the budget. The revenue projected.
That's right.
Exactly. I think about 10% or so. Now, the money that you are supposed to have realized, when did it start coming in? Do you understand? For you to be able to make use of it. Now, those agencies, I hope you know that, those NPAs, Central Bank, JAMB, those money, NNPC, their budget is bigger than even the national budget itself. And hopefully, they hope to receive more. That's why part of the deficit is going to be, taken care of. In addition to hopefully maybe selling some of these, privatizing some of these government projects. Now, what I my conclusion is this, that those bodies that are supposed to be, can we call them revenue generating bodies, there is no clear supervision. Some of them are under some ministries. The minister is just concerned with his civil service and partially or almost don't really take care, apart from sending money to them through what they call the AIE. At the end of every term, quarter, you send their money to them. Their auditing does not come through the mother ministry. And that, for me, limits their ability to get them to be accountable for the money that they
A lot of people are talking about our debt profile. You made mention of it earlier. It appears like 25% of the 2018 budget is also going to go into that. There's also the issue of the capital expenditure, which is still roaming about 30-point-something% of the total budget. But then how do you expect government to run in this kind of situation without keep borrowing?
Yeah, what we have is we've not been lucky to have a president who can be decisive in taking decisions that will address this situation. We all know that the recurrent expenditure in the country is huge. It's about 50% or over 50% of the budget. And if you have that, it means you are spending more, you are consuming rather than producing. You are consuming economy. Now, we know what the problem is. If we go back into history, we used to have Orosaye's report. Orosaye came out and he told us about duplication of agencies, which they was referring to. You know, we had over 200 and something agencies duplicated, and all of them have huge, humongous amount of money being voted for them year in, year out. Those agencies with multiple functions, you know, similar functions, should be merged together. We know that, but nobody is willing to do that because they have to keep those agencies as jobs for the boys. So is federal government really taking decisions in the best interest of the country? If you refuse, you know, to match those agencies, you know, there's a question mark around that. Then again, when you look at revenue, recurrent expenditure, the income that we will make projected currently is strictly for recurrent. The money for capital expenditure is what the federal government proposes to borrow, and also projected to come from possible income, you know, make pressures to increase the IGR. Right. But the fact of the matter is, it means your capital expenditure is depending on uncertainty, uncertain income, whereas the recurrent expenditure is certain income. So basically, because workers have to be paid. So therefore, to what extent are we addressing, you know, this problem? To what extent is the budget of the country functioning or working for majority of the people? Because one way to look at it is, if you divide it per head, if you're paying about 1 million civil servants, you know, you're spending, you know, more than half of the budget on 1 million civil servants. What happens to the rest of 179 million Nigerians? We are supposed to benefit from the provision of those capital expenditure, infrastructures and all that. So what happens to us? The rest of us, you know, are being shortchanged. That's basically what it means when you look at it from the point of view of social justice. So basically, there are millions of Nigerians who will never benefit from that budget, simply because government will not invest either in infrastructure or fund health appropriately. Like, we only have 3.9% for health instead of 15% commitment, which you have. We have only 7% for education instead of 25%. So when you look at all those, because those are the things people can benefit, the rest of us, hospitals, schools, that's where we benefit. But that is not what is happening. Rather, government will rather keep all those multiple, you know, all those agencies with similar functions, you know, rather keep them so that they can use them for job for the boys. So the only thing Buhari can do is to merge those agencies, so that is the only way to make a difference. We will be able to reduce our recurrent expenditure by half, and that will free money for capital investment.
On the contrary, Mr. President is asking lawmakers and indeed Nigerians to trust his economic policy. he made mention how they have brought Nigeria out of recession. That's still highly debatable. But of recent, the Vice President received the World Bank, and it's about Nigeria experiencing, or Nigerian being ranked upward in the ease of doing business. Yes. According to Mr. President, he's delighted to say that Nigeria has moved up 24 places to the 145th position in 2017. Now, according to that report also, the World Bank is saying that Nigeria is among the top 10 reforming countries in the world. I mean, is it that Nigerians are closing their eyes from this reality, or this figure and data is not impacting on the real experiences of our people?
Ifemi, what that index is saying is that we can attract foreign investment. That foreign investment is coming is another issue entirely. Do you understand? I mean, we're talking about visa. We're talking about registration of business. It means you can come in and register your company. You know, you can get a visa very quickly. There will be nobody will disturb you, and you can get your work permit or whatever. All those things that is what that only means. But that does not necessarily mean that there will be investment. There's still something you still need to do. 2 or 3 things. It's one, your infrastructure, is it adequate such that when I bring in my capital, I will have the infrastructure to be able to produce. I'm talking about roads, transportation, power, water. You understand? Thank God telephone is good. You understand? That is what we are talking about. And of course, the last 2 budgets, you can see that power, transportation, works, and housing are the biggest capital expenditure, if you like. However, are we actually getting what we want? Are we? Don't forget, budget is just a plan. That we have those 555 billion is going to be spent. Does the money come? Does it come? Does it come at the right time to start with? And then, are you awarding the contracts on time so that we can? The president. Don't forget, the president said in his budget, he said, what we didn't do this year will be going into the 2018 budget, which comes back to what Biodun says, that even that budget that you're talking about is actually a merger of part of this year and next year. It's not as if 2018 is starting on it. That's why it is going to be 8 point something trillion. It's not as if we did well this year and we are moving on.
How feasible?
And then he's talking about, we are thinking of a 3 point something growth rate. Meanwhile, IMF tells you that you're not going to do beyond 1.9%. Do you understand? You know, even the 3 point something that we are talking about is even below the world average that the IMF gave about 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Correct. Yeah.
You understand? So then telling us that we are in the top 10. Look, that is all PR. As far as I'm concerned, that's PR. Where is the investment?
It's like Nigeria being the biggest economy.
Yeah, they're just patting us on the back and okay, you've done well.
But how feasible, in your opinion, is the oil price benchmark of $45 per barrel in 2018?
Yes, I think it's feasible because currently oil is going for, the Brent crude is going for $60 a barrel, and we've done the budget on 45. Everything now depends on a lot of factors. People are concerned about the Niger Delta Avengers, not disrupting production. But it's not only Niger Delta Avengers alone that impacts on our oil production. You have state of the facilities, the oil pipelines and all that. You have that. You also have piracy, pirates and bunkering. You have those problems. It also depends on what goes on in the international community. If there's a problem somewhere, maybe a threat to a major oil producer, then again, it will affect the price of oil. It will go up, and once it goes up, like now, once it's now on $60 a barrel, from $55 a barrel, America would now be reopening the oil rigs again, you know, the shale oil rigs, and then it will become profitable. So within a short time, you see that again also dropping. So what is not realistic is to project that we would sustain 2.3 million barrels a day on average. I don't think we will eat that. I would think probably we eat 2.1 or 2.2 million on average. That would be more realistic. So we are likely going to have some shortfall, even based on the projection of 45